Hello and welcome to yet another video. Today I want to talk about all the promo cards that have been revealed during the Kickstarter campaign for the upcoming Terraforming Mars content. Every day during the 17-day long campaign we got at least one new card, and keep in mind that for the foreseeable future you can only get these cards by pledging the Kickstarter. They will not be released to regular retail for quite some time. But let's start off today's video with two new cards that I already talked about briefly in my last video on the new content. Anti-desertification techniques and taikomagnetics. The former is in my opinion a mediocre prelude that I'd only pick up if I want to go for ecologist, and the latter is a really strong corporation with built-in continuous card draw. It offers the same effect as High-Tech Lab, and with enough power production you can make sure to always hit the right cards that you need for your combo. I only see some problems with this corp if you're playing with colonies, since then you'll need to decide whether to use your power for card draw or trading. Or you just get even more power prot. But let's get to the first card that I haven't actually spoken about yet. Aqueduct Systems. It's a building tag that costs 9 MC and can only be played once you have one city next to an ocean. When played it grants 1 VP and more importantly, lets you draw 3 building tag cards. First of all, a card that draws 3 other cards is insanely good. Take Sponsors Academy for example. It draws 3, but you have to discard 1 first and everybody else gets to draw a card as well. So just outright drawing 3 is insanely good. Of course, the fact that it has to be 3 building tags comes with up and downsides. If you can't find any steal targets, especially in the mid to late game, this card can be a godsend. First of all, it's a building tag itself that even grants a point, and secondly, you're guaranteed to hit steal targets. But the downsides are also apparent. Building tags are often great as development cards early on, but fall off in the late game. With its requirement, you're unlikely to play Aqueduct Systems really early on, so you're probably not getting the most out of cards like Building Industries, Fuel Factory or Nuclear Power. But still, I like this card a lot. Next up, Astro Mechanica. This card is really interesting. It costs 7 MC, comes with a science tag, and lets you return 2 played event cards to your hand, on the condition that these cards do not place special tiles, so for example the updated version of Demos Down. First of all, this is basically 2 card draw, but you already know what you get. That's great value already, just compare it to Tech Demo for example, where you pay 5 for 2 unknown cards. Of course, with that one you could get some crazy combos together to make it cheaper, but you shouldn't underestimate the science tag on Astro Mechanica either. Secondly, some event cards, especially GIA, the regular Demos Down, or Large Convoy are incredibly strong, and the game is balanced around having them in the deck just once. Getting those back on hand to play them again is just busted as hell, but also such a fun mechanic. I love it. The next card that was teased is Carbon Nano Systems. It's a blue card with the trusty combo of science and building tag that we have seen so often already. Costs 14 MC, grants 1 VP and comes with the effect that whenever you play a science tag, including this one, you collect a resource on the card, and then these resources can be used as 4 MC when playing space or city tags. Interesting card. After playing 5 science tags and using up the resources gained, it will have paid back 20 MC, enough to pay for buying and playing the card. 5 science tags is quite hard though. Sure, if you play Carbon Nano Systems in Gen 1 or 2, this can easily happen, but I think it's too expensive and slow for that. If you can develop card draw and some steal prot, then I see this card being quite strong though. Interesting concept, and I like the use of custom resources, since then there's almost no way to put resources on this card other than by triggering the effect. This way it's quite easy to make sure that the card can't be abused in certain scenarios. We're not done with interesting building tags. The next one is Siberia Systems, a spin on robotic workforce. It costs 17, grants a building tag and a steal prot, and lets you copy the production box of 2 of your played building tags. In the right scenario, this is nuts. Dome farming, morehole area, medical lab, fusion power. There are certain cards that are already insane combo pieces for robotic workforce, but with this, which grants more than double the effect for less than double the price, they become insane. But of course, this is only worth it in the early to mid game, since it's expensive and just grants production. Sadly, we can only speculate about the next card, Established Methods, since the promo box is right in front of the effect. It's a tagless prelude that grants 30 MC, but seemingly you will have to use some amount of that money in standard projects. We don't yet know following which rule though. Maybe you have to play standard projects until you cannot do that anymore. For example, 2 SP asteroids would leave you with 2 MC from the prelude, too little for another SP, and then I guess you'd be allowed to keep the change. Or a city would leave you with 5 MC, a greenery with 7, 2 SP power with 8, and so on. If that turns out to be true, it's a quite flexible prelude, but not that strong, I guess. Although 2 power prod and 8 MC doesn't sound too bad. Luckily, we can see everything important about the next card, and it's not filling me with joy. Giant Solar Collector is a prelude that comes with a power and a space tag and grants 2 power prod as well as 1 Venus step. This prelude is very similar to Aquifer Turbines, but in my opinion just straight up worse than it. Why? Aquifer Turbines gives a lot more flexibility, since you can choose the placement bonus for that ocean unit you put down. If you take 2 cards, that more than compensates the 3 MC that you have to pay. Also, there are more good cards that require oceans to be placed, and since there are less oceans than Venus steps, a single ocean is way more impactful on the scale than 1 Venus step. Giant Solar Collector will not meaningfully help you to get Venusian animals down, for example, but Aquifer Turbines gets you quite far on the way towards kelp farming. Next up, we get a card that I thought would be themed around the Reds, since we know part of its effect from the card Red Tourism Wave. Hermetic Order of Mars costs 10 MC, has a max requirement of 4% oxygen, and grants 2 MC prod as well as 1 MC for every empty space next to one of your tiles. This card is busted in the right scenario. Just imagine a start with Nuke Zone, Natural Preserve, and this. After playing these 2 tiles, that are already really good early game cards, you can play Hermetic Order of Mars, get 12 MC back and 2 MC prod. Heck, even with just 1 tile it's better than sponsors. The max requirement just makes sure that you can't play it in the mid to late game for insane money back, so it's really designed as an early game card, but in my opinion it's quite strong. Do you like playing Helion? Then I've got the right card for you. Homeostasis Bureau is a 16 MC building tag that grants 2 heat prod, but the interesting part lies in its effect. It grants 3 MC whenever you increase the temperature. There are 19 temperature steps on the base game board, so that's 57 MC that you could possibly earn if you play this card immediately. Of course, that's totally unrealistic, even in 2P, but if you're rushing versus someone who's going for a long game, he will need to think twice whether he really wants to not take any temperature bumps to prolong the game. Next up, we get a card that will be one of the most influential ones in the entire game. Kaguya Tag. It costs 10, grants a city and a plant tag, 2 MC prod, draws a card, and lets you replace one of your greeneries with a city. This is an absolutely busted effect, and I can tell you why. First of all, it's the cheapest city in the game. Secondly, when removing the greenery, half of its direct point value stays intact, as the oxygen you gain from it is not removed. And lastly, with Kaguya Tech, you can directly punish people that want to profit off of your greeneries. Let's say you're ocean walking and place 4 greeneries in total. Your opponent places a city next to these greeneries and subsequently his own greeneries around his city. If you replace one of these greeneries with a city, not only do you make positive points from this move, but you also reduce your opponent's points. A scenario similar to this happens regularly, so this card, in my opinion, especially because it's cheap and also draws a card, is completely insane. Another asteroid-based corporation will be coming our way in the form of Qua Cooperative. It holds 2 space tags, 33 MC worth of starting capital, and grants 1 titanium prod. Its action lets you place as many asteroids as you have space tags on the Corp, and these asteroids can later be used to pay for some of the standard projects. We know that you can use these to pay for the standard project Asteroid, which was not surprising given the naming and lore behind it, and my guess is that you can also use them for the standard project Aquifer, since there are quite a few space events that let you place oceans, so it would thematically fit. Another option would be the standard project Venus, but since there's no Venus icon on the bottom left corner of the card, I think that's unlikely. But how strong is this? It can definitely get quite good in a late game, but it can't get infinitely good, since you can probably only use it on SP Asteroid and SP Aquifer, which means that you will contribute to ending the game and cannot stack an insane amount of space tags. Very interesting idea nonetheless. Next up, another busted card, but probably also my favorite of this pack, Mars Nomads. It costs 13 MC and lets you place 1 gold cube on an empty tile on the map. Afterwards, you can move it once per gen to another empty tile, blocking the tile for the gen and gaining the placement bonus and ocean rebates of that tile. This is basically a really flexible production card that can also draw you cards, since you can choose whether you want plants, steel, MC, cards, titanium, or even the South Pole effect on Hellas. Of course, it's not great in the late game, but if you get this early on, it's insane. One thing to keep in mind is that since you can only place it on empty tiles, the placement bonus you can get will get weaker and weaker throughout the game. Neptunian Power Consultants is a complicated but interesting card. It costs 14 MC, grants a power tag, and whenever an ocean is placed, it grants you the option to pay 5 MC, for which you can also use steel, to increase your power prod and collect one hydroelectric resource on the card. These resources will then be worth 1 point at the end of the game. If you plan on placing a few oceans yourself early on, this can be worth it in my opinion, especially if you have leftover steel. But if you rely on your opponents placing the oceans for you, better don't rely on this for your power prod. It's unreliable, and if your opponents pay attention, they can even try to place oceans once you have spent all your money, so you can't even trigger this card. Interesting concept, but probably too unreliable in most cases. Why don't we build houses out of wood on Mars? Well, Martian Lumber Corp lets you do that. The 6MC building and plant tech that requires you to have 2 greeneries, which is quite difficult in the early game. For playing it, you get 1 plant plot and the option to use 1 plant as 3MC when paying for building tax. First of all, 1 plant plot as well as a building tag and a plant tag are great value for 6MC, if it wasn't for the requirement though. And regarding the effect, I like the concept, but I don't think using plants as 3MC is going to be super useful very often. When you get down ElectroCat, you almost always want to sell steel instead of plants, just because greeneries are such big point scorers. Same with Martian Lumber Corp, I imagine. Most of the time you should be better off just using the plants for conversions instead of playing building tags. Of course, there can be exceptions. Maybe you developed some plant prod early on, but then got down a super good long game setup while your opponent rushed heat and oceans like crazy. Then you don't want to increase the oxygen if possible to stall out the game and catch up. In that case, you can use the plants as money instead. Next up, we have a really interesting card called Red Ships. It costs 2 MC, can only be played once you've reached 4% oxygen, and grants you an action that, by the looks of it, lets you generate 1 MC for every city or special tile next to an ocean. First of all, I'm not 100% sure that that's the action this card grants, but it makes sense when looking at the iconography. Secondly, I really don't get why this card is based on oxygen. In my mind, this would be a cool precedent for the first ever double global requirement, with it requiring an ocean as well as a certain temperature. And lastly, I'm really glad this doesn't count on greeneries, since then it would be busted as hell. Greeneries are most often placed next to oceans in something called an ocean walk. So this card would generate huge amounts of MC if it worked like that. On day 16 we actually got 2 cards, the first of which is one of the most broken cards I've ever seen. Solar Logistics. This card should definitely be nerfed before coming out. It costs 10 MC, has an Earth and a space tag, grants 2 instant titanium, making it basically cost only 14, and holds 1 VP. The busted part about this card are its 2 effects. The first one is a weaker version of Earth Office, granting a 2 MC discount for every Earth tag you play. When playing with all expansions, nearly 13% of cards are Earth tags, and I'd say that they are also better on average than other cards. But that's not all. The truly busted part about Solar Logistics is its second effect, that lets you draw 1 card whenever anyone plays a space event. This makes this card insanely strong for a long game player facing off against a Russia. It grants a point, a discount, is a space tag for which there are plenty of discounts itself, especially in a science strat, and it lets you benefit from the enemy's space events that he has to play to end the game fast. I don't know what they thought when designing this card. The next card is the complete opposite. I'm really not sure whether I would ever play this card. It's called Rect, costs 14 MC, holds a building and a power tag, grants 1 instant TR, and lets you turn 1 power prod into 1 plant prod once per gen. One thing I like about this card, it's a power tag that doesn't increase your power prod, which is rare. If you get a lot of cheap power early on, for example with Thorgate, that you don't need, then this can be useful. But basically, you're turning one way of increasing one terraforming parameter into another way to increase a different terraforming parameter. Not sure if that's worth it. It being a building tag sure helps to play this in the mid-game if you have a lot of steel laying around though. On the last day of the Kickstarter campaign, the last 2 cards were revealed, the first of which is Saint Joseph of Cupertino Mission. It costs 7 MC and lets you pay 5 MC, for which you can also use steel to place silver cubes on cities on the map. Since there can only be 1 silver cube per city, you cannot use this action if there are no free cities left. Each silver cube at the end of the game is worth 1 point. There's also a second part of this, which we can read better on this other picture that was released already. Whenever you place a cube, the owner of the city in question is able to pay 2 MC to draw a card. This means that this card is extra good if you yourself have a lot of cities that you can use this on. But keep in mind, you'll be paying 7 MC total for a point and a card. And lastly, there's strategic base planning. It's a prelude with a city, building and space tech, so immediately great for Eridor or in a diversifier race. Its effect lets you place a city and a colony at the expense of 3 MC. All I can say is, what the fuck? Compare this prelude to early settlement or self-sufficient settlement, the 2 other city placing preludes. It's light years better. If you place a colony on Luna or Ganymede, you get the respective productions and basically pay 3 MC for the added space tech, and more importantly, getting the colony bonus every time someone trades there for the rest of the game. This prelude is by far the best city prelude in the game. These were all the teased promo cards for the upcoming Terraforming Mars expansions. I also want to make a video about regular Prelude 2 cards that have been teased as well, and also about the new and changed milestones, but they wouldn't have fit into this video. So you can look forward to that, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these videos. But what do you think about these promo cards? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and check out my Twitch channel, where I play Terraforming Mars regularly. See you in the next video.